Okay. All right. Well, let's rolling our hip. Rolling the hips. I can't decide if it's, the gray makes you feel like, well, maybe it's chill. It's not. It's really kind of warm here. So go the other way. So, so we're gonna bring the energy up from the lower dantian up to the shoulders, back and down, up, back and down. And then circle the other way. So you're going back from the lower dantian, bring the energy up, and then up to the shoulders, and then roll over the top and down. So from the lower dantian, roll up the back, shoulders up to the ears, and then forward, and then you just start to drop the chi down. So it feels more like your whole spine is involved in the shoulder rolls coming up from a lifting spine and then sinking. So then you want to bring your ear to your shoulder. So you're lengthening one side of your neck. So instead of thinking of the bending side, you're thinking of the lengthening side. And then you're dropping your nose forward. And then lifting the lengthening side. And then if you want to go back, make sure that you're not compressing back. You're just relaxing back. Lengthen the side of the neck and then relax forward. Or you can do lengthen the side of the neck and just keep the roll going forward, which I think is a little safer if you have an arthritic condition in your neck. You can always increase the size of the circle by lifting the chin and then going back, and then just keep the forward relaxed, and then the effort into the lengthening, and then relax. And then adding the opposite hand turn. Okay. It's going to bring the chin in to the chest and, or actually just relax your head forward and then go to your lower dantian. Just compress a little bit so you start to open up through your low back. You let your chest be soft and open, not closing too much. And letting your hands come to down about your knees. We're just going to let the arms hang in this one. And then drop the tailbone, bend the knees, and roll back up. And see if you could do a couple of these rolls without doing with the arms. So I'm drawing the navel in, I'm opening up the low back, and I'm arching through my low back forward, letting the arms hang. And they can hang a little bit further down, and then bend the knees and find the middle of your feet and roll back up. Lift the crown, and then lower dantian, stretch the low back, let the arms hang, and then bend the knees, and then roll back up, push up from the middle of the feet and roll back up. Okay, low back arch, arching forward, that is. The arms hang. You can go as far as you're comfortable going, and then sit the tailbone, bend the knees, and push up from the middle of the feet. Okay, so just getting a little bit of that forward and back thing going on. So I'm gonna put my hands on my low back and I'll lift my crown. And then I want to feel a stretch, a lengthened stretch from my pubic bone up to my chin. So it's not as much, if you think go back, then you'll do that same thing where you're crunching the vertebrae. I want to go up and then arc back and feel the stretch from the pubic bone up to the chin. And then come back and relax. Push up from the feet to the crown, arcing back, lift the chin, and relax. Pushing up from the feet to the crown, lift the chin. It's perfectly fine to do that back bend as long as you're not crunching the low back, that you keep the length going. Right? And then just one more, because when we do the fundamental Qigong, there's a little bit of that back arching. And relax. So you're going to do some side bend here. So you can step a little bit wider and sit a little bit if you have a tendency to feel off balance from left to right. So I'm going to let my hand run down one leg, which gives me support, the outside of one leg, and the other hand come up towards my armpit. And I want to draw my navel in, drop my tail, and come back up. And roll down the other IT band. Draw the navel in and roll back up. Roll down. This is the gallbladder meridian on the outside and on the ribs. Draw the navel in, come back up, and roll down. And come back up. Okay, we do something we haven't done in a really long time. This is called monkey listens with one ear. So we're just doing a rotation of the spine in a different way. So you can start with just one hand on your hip and the other hand behind your ear, just on your skull behind your ear. And you want to keep that knee rooted, but rotate as though you want to point your elbow to the back as much as you can. Okay, we're going to open. This is the fun part. And then bend, hand to the hip, and then the other hand behind the ear, and turn. Keep that rooted home knee really rooted as you turn. Point the elbow towards the back and open. Hand to hip, behind the ear, turn, especially rooting in the knee that's farther away from the move, the turn. Okay, and then if you want to increase the difficulty, put the other hand behind your back and turn. And open. Try behind your back and turn and open. Behind your back and turn and open. Of course, if you have a shoulder injury, you might want to just keep your hand on your hip. If it's too much for your shoulder, don't go there. Okay. So letting my arms just turn up and down, kind of like cleaning out my arm sockets. Really working on that twist at the shoulder girdle. Palm up, palm down. Bring the hands in and down. We're going to do a couple of those strengthening the upper back Qigongs. So finding your feet rooted, extending through the fingers and then pushing up. Push the heels of the hands forward. One hand floats down, the other one goes up. Pushing down, pushing up. Really let yourself extend the spine, feet to crown. So it's more important that the interior opens, and then as much as you can through your arms to your hands. And then relax. Come back to the center. First part of this, just let some of the effort go. One drops, one rotates in the shoulder, and then pushing from the feet to the crown. Get long in your spine and let your hands separate. And we're just going to do a couple of these in a row. Push from your feet to your crown. And one more. Push from your feet to your crown. All right, so we're going to turn around to the back. So same thing, make sure you stay rooted, especially in that hip that's far away from the turn. Slowly turning, keeping the front hand steady, the back hand moving back. Chin in, tail down, crown up, separating the hands, and slowly come back. So this really helps you to, in a sense, to get off of your being too heavy on your legs, because you're starting to open up the upper, lengthening the spine, feeling the width of the body from side to side. So there's a little more energy in the upward lifting. And one more on each side. Keep the hips as steady as you can. Chin in, tailbone down, rotating around a center. Separate the hands and come back. And turn. Okay. Just going to bend the elbows. Push the elbows forward, drop the tailbone down, chin in, crown up, lift the elbows. Roll out to the sides and open. Bend. Drop the tail, chin in. Push up from your feet to your crown, lift your elbows. It really strengthens your back, lengthens your body through the ribs and through the abdomen, through the spine. Bend, push the elbows forward, drop the tailbone down, make sure the chin is not sticking forward. Push from your feet to your crown. And this one, you could just press your head a little bit into your forearms, roll out to the sides, and open. And we're going to bring it back to the chair just because I don't want you guys to lose the lesson that we're trying to learn through the sits bone. So I'm going to just bring my elbows back and push forward. So now that the upper is a little bit more open, we've done, roll downs, open to the back, side bends, and rotations, just in a slightly different way than with the Qigong. Now we have a little bit more lift through the torso. We can sit in the chair and try to find the sits bones as they will relate to the feet. Okay, so into our chair. And the lift that you just found, the sun came out. Sit in my chair and find my sits bones. And then try to lift from the middle. First of all, just sit here for a moment and find your sits bones, okay? Which is a little easier if your upper body's not slumping. So if my upper body were to slump, I'd roll to the back of my sits bones. If my low back was really tight, I'd be sitting on the front of my sits bones. So again, what I do with my spine is going to affect my pelvis. What I do with my pelvis is going to affect my spine. So I want to find a more neutral position, lifted position through the spine, and rest my body weight on the middle of my sits bone. And then this rocking back and forth is leaving the spine as it is, but opening the hip crease and closing the hip crease. All the while, yes, I'm rolling slightly onto the front of the sits bone, slightly onto the back of the sits bone by virtue of changing the angle of the spine. But the idea here is to get a little stretch just above the pelvis and a little bit of work just at the lower core. Because I want to release, if the pelvis is shoved up into the torso, and the torso has been shoved down into the pelvis, I'm trying to individuate those things. So we just did part of it by doing the upper body. Now we're trying to just get a little release above all in the structures that come into the pelvis. So the pelvis can have some more independent movement. Right. So right now it's just rocking forward and back and try to feel a teeny tiny stretch at your low back. And then a teeny tiny, bit of work at your very lower core. If I went back further, I would start to feel the engagement of my upper core. And so I'm not there yet. I want to stick to just above my pubic bone at my dantian. Okay, and then I come back and find the middle of that and then just go left and right. Right, all that happens below my hips, into my knees and into my feet. It's going to be set up by my pelvis. So if I shift side to side, and we won't always be doing chair in this class. So I'm just trying to teach you enough of it so that you could use it if you're having a problem with leveling your pelvis, which most of us actually do. When I do this tiny shift side to side, I'm opening up the SI joints. Okay, I come back and try to find 50-50 weight between the left and the right, and then go back towards one sits bone and then forward towards my knee. Okay, so I'm just rocking back and forth with my spine across the diagonal and trying to wake up the oblique and stretch the quadratus lumborum muscle. And again, they're going to be related in movement in our body because we move across diagonals. Walking is a cross pattern movement. Right, and then I come back, and as gentle as this is, it can do an amazing amount of work towards releasing tension and held positions in the pelvis, which might be governing why your shoulders are off and why your knees are off, and etc. Starts here. Across the diagonal, I feel the oblique wake up, I feel the QL stretch. Oblique wakes up and the QL stretches. And then just go around and circle. So we're going to jump right into kind of manufacturing a channel stance in the chair. Okay, so I come back and just hope that that was gentle enough to release the ligaments and the structures in my pelvis. All right, so you turn to the side of the chair. You turn sideways on the chair, and one foot is forward like you're at the front of your channel, and the back leg, the hip is open, wider than 45 degrees from that front foot to emulate you could keep the foot flat on the floor, just kind of like a channel, right? So we're going to do the two-handed push. So If you just did this with your arms, like don't move your pelvis at all, just move your arms. And it's a lot of work in the arms without a lot of help from the chi. Okay, so that's the kind of thing we're moving away from in Tai Chi. So if I let myself shift to the front sits bone, weight-wise, and then when I release my hands, I feel myself roll to the front of that sits bone. And then I come back up to the middle of that sits bone, still on the front sits bone. Then I go and sit back and find the middle of the back sits bone. Let the energy drop down the middle of the sits bone. That's important for balance. Then roll to the back of that sits bone to create separation. Then come up between the two sits bones, front sits bone, front of the front sits bone. Okay, thinking now, as you go through this movement, you're kind of studying where you are in your sits bones. Roll to the back. You get this kind of feeling like there's a rocking, a mild rocking from the front of the front sits bone to the back of the back sits bone. You can kind of feel that gentle, small rocking. Imagine that that's the movement that moves before your arms. Okay, so roll forward and then come up to the middle, to the back, roll onto the back, and then separate, roll forward onto the front of the front sits bone, lift up to between the sits bones. The apex, the strongest part of this move is going to be between the two sits bones in their middles. And then I go to the back, the middle of the back sits bone and down. And then I roll onto the back of the sits bone and forward. And notice how different that is. When your pelvis is active, it's alive. And even though it's moving in a very small way, it's sending the energy impulse through the arms. The arms will get lighter. Okay, so two-handed push. You want to learn how to move a little bit more, like if my arms were just like seaweed in water, and the current underneath being the pelvis is what's pushing the arms. And then your arms will get softer and they'll get lighter. So you won't get so stiff in your shoulders. All right, we're gonna do the other side, just emulating a channel. So one foot is straight and forward, the other foot is on an angle. 45 degrees is kind of small. And if you have issues in your hips, then 45 degrees is where you're at. If you can open it comfortably enough, a little wider, 50 or 55 degrees, you're a little bit better off. So again, the movement pattern of my arms, we know this circle from having done it for months. Right, if I move my arms by themselves, they tire easily because there's no internal chi supporting that movement. So I roll to the front of that sits bone, the front sits bone, and then I come back onto the middle of front sits bone. And then between the two sits bones, and then on the middle of the back sits bone and down, because the middle of the sits bone is going to give you the most vertical energy. Then roll slightly to the back of that sits bone, between the sits bones, front sits bone, front of the front sits bone, release, back to the middle of front sits bone, the middle of between both sits bones, middle of the back sits bone. You feel a little weight transfer. Roll to the back of that sits bone, back to its middle, between the two, to the front one, to the front of the front one. So feeling the weight change. The back of the chair does kind of get in the way. It would be nice if it was a stool. Okay, so we're going to come back down. And this time, you know that you're rolling. Front of the front sits bone, just play with the pelvis. Back of the back sits bone. You see how you go through the middle of one, the middle of both, the middle of the front one, the front of the front one, middle of it. You feel both sits bones. Roll to the back of the back sits bones. So you start to get this like rolling sensation. So I kept my arms still and I let my pelvis roll. It's going to ask my spine to roll a bit as well, but the movement's coming from inside. The rest of this stuff is like the softness of my arms following the circle of my pelvis. And then your arms will get lighter, they'll get softer, and they'll always follow the interior. Okay, so just if you're not, one of the most important things to keeping your body resilient, healthy, and moving in the right direction is keep your pelvis alive. Keep it moving. And if you do Tai Chi for many years and you're only doing it externally, it's not that you're not getting exercise, but you're not getting as much good exercise as you could be getting. So investing a little time in the chair, if your back's bothering, if your neck's bothering, if anything's bothering you, go to the chair, level your pelvis, do a few movements through the pelvis, roll on the sits bones and have that movement show up in the rest of your body, and you will start to feel better. All right.